We need to get this plan approved as quickly as possible. Every day that it is not approved is another day this choice is made for us, and we are forced to fight this oil farther and farther in our wetlands instead of off of our coast. We'd rather fight this. We don't want a drop of oil to hit our coast. But as governor of Louisiana, I'd much rather fight this oil on a barrier island on a hard, rocky coast than have to fight it inside of our wetlands. Thank you all very much.
From day one, President Obama has made it very clear that the United States of America will not rest. We will not rest for 1 minute until this problem gets resolved. And that is why Secretary Napolitano is here today on her 4th visit here. I've been in Houston at the Command Center on 4 times, and this is also my 4th visit here to Louisiana. And we will not rest until this job gets done. It is also important to note that with us today is the leadership of the United States Senate. When we think about the Assistant Majority Leader of the United States Senate, Dick Durbin is here with 5 of the colleagues in the U.S. Senate because the eyes of the United States Senate are on Louisiana, what's happening here in the Gulf Coast today. I want to make it very clear. Under the law, BP is the responsible party. BP is charged with capping their leaking oil well and paying for the response and for the recovery without limitation. They will be held accountable. We will keep our boot on their neck until the job gets done. And as I said yesterday, we will make sure that all of their responsibilities are fulfilled to the people of the Gulf Coast and to the United States government. When Admiral Allen, as a commander of this situation, is not satisfied with the actions of BP, he calls and will call BP and pushes them to take every appropriate step. He will order them to take the appropriate steps. I also have made it clear that we are not standing on the sidelines and letting BP do what BP wants to do. The federal government has mounted the largest response to fight this oil in all of the history of this country. We have deployed more than 1,000 vessels. 20,000 plus people are out there working day and night. We have burned oil off the surface. We have skimmed it, dispersed it on the surface and in the undersea. We have deployed miles and miles of protective boom, and we are working to protect and clean up the shorelines. We are getting, as Secretary Napolitano said, independent flow rate numbers from the best scientists in the world that will tell the United States how much of this BP oil has already spilled out into the Gulf Coast. The administration has done everything we can possible to make sure that we push BP to stop the spill and to contain the impact. We have also been very clear that there are areas where BP and the private sector are the ones who must continue to lead the efforts with government oversight, such as the deployment of private sector technology 5,000 feet below the ocean surface to kill the well. BP and the private sector, with the help of federal scientists, are the ones who must get that problem solved, and we have the oversight capacity in the administration to make sure that they are doing that. Let me just encapsulate what I said in my own words. The fact of the matter is that this is a BP mess. It is a horrible mess. It is a massive environmental mess. The accountability here, as the investigations unfold, will hold them accountably both civilly and in whatever way is necessary. And we will not rest until the job is done. That's why we are spending the amount of time that we are spending on this matter. We are resolute and confident as we move forward that better days are ahead. But in the meantime, as we go through this very, very difficult time period, our job collectively under the President's direction is to not rest a single day, but to keep pushing with everything that we have to make sure that the very best is done under these very difficult circumstances. And with that, it is my honor to introduce the Assistant Majority Leader, United States Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois.
Thanks. Thanks, Secretary Salazar. I want to thank Secretary Napolitano as well. I also want to thank our hosts here, my colleagues, Senator Mary Landrieu and Senator David Vitter, who are hosting us with Congressman Cow here from Louisiana. We put this trip together on short notice. I contacted my colleagues late last week and said, we'd like you to come and see firsthand what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico. And the turnout was amazing. We ended up not only with those you see from the state of Louisiana, but clearly, in addition to those, we have Senator Jeff Bingaman, who is the chairman of the Energy Committee in the United States Senate. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, who is a member of that committee, ranking member of that committee, the Energy Committee as well, and a member as well, Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island. The reason we came here was to see firsthand what has happened. I can tell you, after seeing it and after listening in that hall to the men and women whose lives have been affected, that I've come away with a new feeling about BP. BP, in my mind, no longer stands for British Petroleum. It stands for beyond patience. People have been waiting 34 days for British Petroleum to cap this well and stop the damage that's happening across the Gulf of Mexico. There are options and alternatives that we hear a lot about, but what we've heard from this administration and what we need to tell BP is excuses don't count anymore. You caused this mess. Now stop the damage and clean up the mess. It's your responsibility. When I listen in there to the oystermen, the fishermen, the charter boat operators, some of them were emotional. They're talking about their ways of life. They're talking about their families. They're talking about businesses that they've had for generations that are at stake right here and now. Now, I've seen something like this before in Lisa Murkowski's state. 21 years ago, I went up to see the Exxon Valdez spill. I'll never forget those scenes. They were heartbreaking. That crude oil, that swamp, that sound, that beautiful, beautiful sound, changed the way that that sound works today. Lisa Murkowski can tell you it's different, and the people who live there face a different life because of it. That's what's wrong with this situation. We never should have been where we are today, and now this administration will continue to put the pressure on BP to do what's right, to clean up this mess and pay for every dollar of it. Not the taxpayers of America, but British Petroleum. They're the ones who have to foot the bill here for their mistake, for their accident, and the damage they've caused. It's my honor now to introduce my colleague and friend from the United States Senate and a senator from Louisiana, Mary Landrieu.
Senator Durbin is going to be a strong ally to all of us in Louisiana and the Gulf Coast as we fight for justice and fairness in this situation. Secretary Salazar has been an extraordinary leader. And Secretary Napolitano as the commander of this situation. As they've both described, this is unprecedented, and they are putting the full force of their offices, their departments, and all the assets of the federal government to tackle this problem. Secretary Salazar recognizes, as he said, that BP is responsible. But I recognize that the federal government is in charge of this situation, and he is pressing BP at every level with every scientist at his disposal and every engineer available to him and to the Secretary to get this well shut at the earliest possible convenience, or the earliest possible date, not a convenience, earliest possible date. And they are doing that. I hope it could be done today, if not in the next few days. Secondly, we need all to do a better job of processing these claims. There were some very emotional pleas today, but I've heard them before. I've been here a half a dozen times and on the phone with hundreds of Louisianians and people from around the Gulf Coast. I want to say again, if you made $50,000 last year and you can't work this year, BP is going to write you a check for $50,000. If your business made $1 million last year and you can't make that $1 million this year, BP is going to make your business whole. There is no question in my mind or the minds of these senators or these leaders up here who will pay this bill, to individuals, to businesses, to parishes, to the state, and to the federal government resources that have been spent to date. So I wanted to just, clear that up because there's still some uncertainty. We're working the details of that out, but those bills will be paid in full. And finally, I just want to say that I could not expect more from Secretary Salazar, who's running this department, to have a balance of prosecuting, and that's a good word, prosecuting this incident, but preparing the right way for the future, for our state, for the Gulf Coast, and for the nation that needs to mine these resources safely. So as we clean up this mess, handle the thing right before us, he also has his eye on the future and how we manage the fisheries industry, the oil and gas industry, and all the industries that call this working coast home in a way that protects us and protects the nation. So I thank him for that balance and thank Secretary Napolitano for her leadership too, and call on Senator Vitter from Louisiana.
Thank you very much, Mary. I want to thank the governor for his great leadership. I want to thank the 2 cabinet secretaries and our Senate colleagues for being here. We very much appreciate it. I agree with all of the statements that have been made about BP. But I've spent my time today with these federal government officials focusing on what I think millions of Louisianians feel and know is the greatest inadequacy of the federal response. And that's our inability so far to get a timely, positive response to this crucial emergency dredging Barrier Island plan.